All right, great. Well, welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone is here today for the Washington Graduate Student Loan Program update, where we're going to be providing an update on the status of the build out of the program and then an important discussion where we welcome your participation in how we are looking at and considering eligible graduate programs for this program. So, my name is Luke Miner. I'm the Director of College Savings Plans here at the Washington Student Achievement Council, he, him pronouns. Would love for folks to go ahead and use the chat feature to introduce themselves as well, your organization, your role, if you care to share that with us. I'm going to go ahead and put up some slides here. Alrighty. Can everyone see my screen okay? Should say Graduate Student Loan Program. Okay, great. Let's just go ahead and take a quick look at the agenda. Hopefully everyone received this ahead of time. We're gonna just quickly do introductions. We're gonna set our speak to our meeting purpose and goals. And then we are going to do a program overview and status update, which will quickly remind everyone of the key statutory provisions. We'll dive into the work completed to date, and then our timeline and next steps. And then Mike Miotti, WSAC's Executive Director, will lead us through a discussion of how we go about identifying eligible graduate programs. So with that, maybe Mike, do you want to quickly introduce yourself before I dive into some of the background here?
Yeah, thank you, Luke. I'm Mike Miotti. I'm the Executive Director of WSAC.
Great. And do we have Randy with us yet?
I am on. My video isn't working right, but I'm on.
Okay. Do you mind quickly introducing yourself and explaining your role with us in this program?
Sure. I'm Randy Boehm. I'm one of the partners, along with Darlene Dimitrievs of Education Solution Partners. Our role is to help put the program together, get it up and running, get it functional, and just work on the general operations of getting this thing going.
Thank you, Randy. And then Marla, do you mind just quickly introducing yourself as well, since you're very involved in this?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Marla Skellion, part of the Student Financial Assistance Division, and will be, when you have questions, if Luke's not available, hopefully I can answer them for you.
Okay. Thank you, Marla. And we have several other WSAC team members on with us. So they can wave from the screen if they'd like, but let's go ahead and just dive in again about our intentions here today. So before I dive into these key design elements, as a reminder, today the purpose is really to open up a conversation with you all. As first, we will get you oriented. So our hope is that you come away with an understanding of the reminder of kind of the key structural elements of this program, kind of the considerations about the funding that's available and the realities of how we're going to be able to fund, especially the first year. And then we will be opening up that dialogue to you. We'll be sharing our thoughts about some of the things we are taking into consideration as we're considering the eligible programs for year one here, but definitely want to make this a two-way conversation, which is why we have it set up as a Zoom meeting rather than a Zoom webinar. And just as a reminder, on a logistics standpoint, sometimes there can be background noise, so feel free to keep yourself muted, but use the raise hand feature, the chat, or just come off mute at the appropriate juncture if you want to have questions or share input. But let's go ahead and dive into the key loan design elements per the most up-to-date statute. This is intended to be a loan program targeted at graduate programs in high-need areas. Some of the key structural elements about the loans themselves is they cannot exceed $20,000 per year, but it's up to WSAC to set those limits. We are to also set an interest rate, an annual interest rate, but it cannot exceed 2.5%. And then it provides direction for WSAC to develop grace periods, repayment terms, which are limited to no more than 25 years in most cases, coming up with income-based repayment terms and loan forgiveness terms. So that's a lot of the work that Randy and Darlene are supporting us in doing is looking at best practices that we've seen, that they've seen, and just helping us put together something that makes good sense, is borrower friendly, and helps us meet our statutory objectives of making this a sustainable product for consumers and students moving forward. Other key statutory provisions, an update on the funding. So where we're at with the student loan account is there's $80 million that has been appropriated to the account, and we have a expected minimum program life cycle of 7 years. That's another statutory provision. We are limited to $40 million total for our first 4 years, which works out to an average of $10 million per year. So that's a key reason for our conversation today is we do have necessarily are limited in the total dollars we are able to award and the number of loans we are able to service. So hence this conversation is very important to work together with you to determine where we prioritize and direct those resources to get the maximum impact. And Mike will talk a bit more about some of those goals there. And then to kind of center ourselves in what a key part of this conversation will be today is this definition of eligible graduate program, which by statute means an advanced academic degree in a specialized field of study that has a workforce shortage or is considered high demand. And it does provide examples, but importantly, it says not limited to healthcare and behavioral and mental health professions, early education, K-12, higher education, law enforcement, public safeties, and others as determined by WSAC. So that's a little bit of grounding for us in a starting point for us to begin considering which programs we look at here. Okay. So Randy, are you okay if I turn it over to you to walk us through a little bit of the work that's been completed to date, and then what's coming?
Sure. So Education Solution Partners has been working with WSAC on developing program guidelines for a draft program guidelines for this program. We are at the stage of trying to hire some outside legal counsel to help with that. In fact, we had the first interviews this morning already, and we'll have more tomorrow. Following that, we're going to be issuing RFPs for both the loan origination and the loan servicing. We expect that we will be using outside vendors for both of those areas. And one of the things that I would point out to people, because operationally, we anticipate that they'll be using Elm, that they'll be using ScholarNet, some of the national communication vehicles to originate this loan product. So that's kind of where we're at. The goal is that we will be up and running and functional by the fall semester. So we're looking at the 25-26 academic year. There will be bumps. We don't have everything worked out yet. There will be bumps and struggles along the way. We know that. But that is our goal. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Sorry, I had to come off mute. Thank you for that, Randy. And on the screen, you'll see what Randy's talking about. This is our tentative timeframe at this point. As Randy mentioned, there is a lot of contingencies here. So we will be sure to keep the community updated on our progress in working through these steps. And just a key item I'd like to highlight for purposes of this discussion is we are really looking towards late winter, early spring when the schools and graduate programs are selected and we figure out the allocation model for the dollars available to each of those schools and programs. So we have a few months ahead of us where we will be continuing to engage you in various means to keep you updated, to solicit more feedback. And again, just ask for your open participation and also understanding as we navigate standing up this new program that's a new venture for us and are working with a limited fund base. But I think maybe we can pause before diving into the discussion here. I think we're staying on schedule really well. Does anyone have any kind of questions about what we've been up to this point, any of those upcoming timeline markers we were speaking to before we switch gears into the discussion around eligible graduate programs. If someone on the WSAC team is able to note if there's anything in the chat, the question someone has, that would be great. If not, Mike, or actually, are there any questions in the chat at this point?
Yeah, I don't see any.
Okay, thank you, Heather. So, Mike, are you okay if I kick it over to you to kind of kick off this discussion?
Yeah, yes, and before we get into this bigger strategic topic, is just sharing with you that we suspect that there are going to be two strains of conversation or different areas of conversation going forward that may occur somewhat separately, though people are invited to cross over in any way they want. One body of conversation is going to be actually just the core operational functions of how this works between, WSAC and the financial aid offices on the campuses who will be packaging awards to graduate students, and once a program is determined eligible, how that all plays out in the normal financial aid processing and the relationship between us and institutional financial aid offices. There's the other conversation around which we're not about to get into, and is how do we actually determine what is an eligible program, and how are we going to do that, and what's that going to look like? What are the goals and purposes of doing that? And so those conversations may be of different interest to different people, and so we may figure out a way in some future meetings to have meetings separated out by the specific area of discussion, so that people can easily pick and choose what they want to participate in, and at the same time individuals can connect to us directly, as Luke will talk about at the end of the presentation. So I want to go up to what we see, from looking at this and looking at this opportunity. And let me just ground that opportunity again in a very strategic sense. Is we are lucky to live in a state in Washington that has one of the strongest economies and one of the strongest environments to create opportunities for people to do well in jobs and careers that require advanced degrees. I don't know, Luke, can you put this share? Something happened. I don't know whether I did something. We lost the share.
Sorry, Mike. I will go ahead and share that. I thought maybe you would want to.
No,
That was a miss on my part.
Yeah,
Don't let me disrupt your flow there. Sorry. Go
I
ahead.
don't need the slide for this point, but so so this is a really interesting, innovative move by the state, for the first time to do something significant, but by no means at scale, to support lower income students who would like to earn a master's degree to move into these highly promising fields. So, and by the way the statute's structured is we sort of have, we have this fund balance, and we've got 7 years, to use it in a relatively steady state, so the math is pretty simple. It's about $80 million. If that persists over 7 years, that's a loan origination volume of about 10 million. It's meaningful, but at scale, compared to the entire body of graduate students in high need programs, probably it's modest. But what we want to do is we want to, obviously we're going to meet the statutory goals of the program, but we want to take advantage of this innovative opportunity to help the elected leadership the state of Washington and everyone else who's involved and concerned about these things, because there are very significant equity opportunities here to address gaps and opportunity across, racial, ethnic, first-time students, first-time graduate students, et cetera. Is we want to be able to analyze this program as it goes into operation, so that we can do two things here. First is understand how the program has helped students and how it has helped students meet these high workforce needs, many of which are public policy shaped workforce needs when you look at the sectors that were called out by the legislation. So we want to look at student benefit and broader state benefit, but we also want to take a detailed look, which we know we'll be able to do if we do this correctly. we will be able to look at the long-term financial sustainability of the program. We are pretty confident that there is no chance that, given how generous the borrower benefits, the lower interest rate and other borrower benefits around forgiveness that we'll be trying to we'll build into this, that this kind of a loan program cannot be indefinitely sustainable off of the $80 million that's in the fund. However, it's going to generate probably significant loan repayments over time. Those loan repayments recharge the fund. And we've had a lot of conversations with national experts around this. It is very, very hard to predict in student loan repayment programs what the repayment volume is going to be. The federal government itself has struggled with that for decades to try to predict the loan repayment revenues from any given set of years of lending. So what we do know, and we know a few other states that are looking at this in some of their loan programs, is, if we run the program for, maybe 4 to 5 years, we will have enough repayment data, maybe not complete, but we'll have enough repayment data to begin, with the assistance of financial experts, to be able to create a financial model that says, well, if you want to continue the program at current volume, here's the amount of recharging that needs to go on in the fund, right? It doesn't need another 80 million to maintain the current level. It might need 20 or 25 or 5. We don't know. That's what we would want to be able to share with people. But we would also obviously set the stage for consideration if this was so beneficial to students in the state that the state wanted to increase the scale of the program. We would be able to give them a very robust set of understandings of the benefit of the program, the finances of the program, the sustainability of the program, so that our elected leaders can make the decisions which are their policy decisions to make. So in order to do the analysis, that will drive somewhat the decisions we make on how we scale the program. And in its simplest way of explaining this is to say that if we had a wide open program participation where we tried to identify every single high need program that met the statutory standards, we would probably end up with such a thinly spread loan activity across so many areas, there would not be sufficient data to truly understand how well the program works at the level that we think we can make the best case that such an investment makes sense for the people of Washington. So that, plus just the ability to administer the program, the ability for institutions to, absorb and do their role and evolve over time. We're constructing an approach that we're now going to explain some of our ideas, and these really are ideas that we're looking for interaction, not just today, but in the future, that would help meet the goals, right? So I think we can go on to the next slide, Luke. Okay, so as I've sort of already said, the available funding cannot cover all potentially eligible programs. Now, for those of you who've been around the Washington scenario, and some around this call have been around the Washington financial aid scene for a long time, and there are a number of you who have been longer than me for sure. There was a long period of time when state need grant, for example, our undergraduate need-based grant, could not cover everyone who was eligible. And somewhere many decades ago, there was a decision made as to how to handle that, which was not to sort of spread it around at reduced award amounts, but to maintain the large award amounts and basically end up with a population of served and eligible but unserved, right? So we're clearly going to have, this bifurcation, out there among graduate students of those. There's going to be people eligible, and there are going to be people who are served who get a loan. There's going to be people eligible and who don't get a loan, right? And so that is something, that this is going to be far more on the unserved side than SNG, State Need Grant, was in the years that I was familiar with it in its final years of operation. So this is going to be a big program, but a boutique program, and there's just going to be a lot of issues. There's just going to be a lot of issues around, the fact that it's only going to be able to serve a tiny number of people of programs and of people who are in those programs who are eligible, perhaps. So we will need to determine this right scale or number of programs, and that's going to be based on one, optimizing the loan impact, right? If we want the loan, if we want to be able to demonstrate that the loan has a serious positive benefit to students, the economy, et cetera, we think the loans have to be big enough, and the statutory limit is quite high, 20,000, so that certainly can fit within that. It doesn't have to be 20,000, but the loan amounts have to be big enough to be clearly a major factor in the student's assessment of affordability of the graduate program. So $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 loans for a $12,000, $15,000 tuition whatever it might be, I'm just making up a hypothetical, is probably not going to achieve that level of impact. So that's why we're thinking these have to be relatively large and as in dollar amount and in proportion of tuition. It needs to be, the scale has to support sound analysis, student benefits, and financial sustainability, I already discussed. And it needs to stay within administrative capabilities, both on our end and and on the institution side. I'll sort of bring the last point that talks about the focus is the role of the first year sort of fits in here, is to understand that we clearly see this as this first year is a first step, right? Whatever we do in the first year, we are not going to simply clone in each year in the future. We're going to launch the program the first year, learn from our partners at the institutions, and also from students who participate. And then for the second year of the loan program, we may add additional eligible graduate programs. We may change up other things because of what we've learned in the last year. So this will be an adaptive and responsive approach. Given the very limited amount of scope that we think we can reach, our approach right now is we would be asking the universities that offer the graduate programs that they would have to decide which programs can apply. So we would probably come up with some kind of limit on the number of applications per institution. And that limit may vary based on the distribution of graduate enrollment institutions. We won't clone it by a pure percentage ratio, but graduate student enrollment is extremely variable among the universities in this state. We want to respect that in some way, and then have the institution in some way give a blessing to which programs are allowed to apply. That does call into question who at the institution will do that. That will be the institution's decision, and hopefully that won't be difficult for them to, however they want to do it, they can choose that. And I see we've got a question, and I think I have sort of reached the end of explaining what we're talking about here. And I would say the last point I would make is, given this, we would be highly likely to limit the first year to programs within the categories that are named in the RCW. And we will explore the possibility of narrowing some of them more specifically, perhaps using zip codes. But that's a conversation we want to have with people over the next, couple months. I do see Michelle has a question.
I'm sorry, my dog accidentally pressed the button. I don't have a question.
Well, does your dog? I'd be.
My
I'd love
puppy's
to-
in my lap.
I know what your dog's
apologize.
question is. Give me a treat. Yeah. That's great. Okay, so then I think we can go. That's way better than the dog ate your homework in elementary school. But in any event, why don't we go on to what's the next slide, Luke? Let's see what we got here.
So I think we've reached the end of the prepared slides
okay,
and are
reached the
looking
end,
to
yeah,
dive
okay.
into the conversation.
So hold on one second. So there were some things we didn't get on the slide as we were sort of adapting this, and we want to be very clear that our goal, and we'll be talking to people about this, is that we would have very generous borrower benefits. I mean, that's a term of art in student loan world. Many of you know what I'm talking about when I'm saying that, others might not, but that's things like obviously the low interest rate is a borrower benefit. But when the federal government talks about borrower benefits and federal student loans, they're talking about things like forgiveness, deferment, et cetera. And we really see this as an opportunity for this program to be a national model for how borrower benefits can be part of a student loan program, that the end result, speaking very broadly, is that only those borrowers who succeed financially and can afford to pay will be repaying these loans. And if things don't work out for you, right, and which is sort of the model of some of the borrower benefits that exist now, is the loan can be forgiven. We'll also be exploring the possibility of doing loan forgiveness for high need public policy areas, that is similar to some of the things we do in our very tiny existing loan programs and in other federal, these exist in other further program areas where, say, for example, if we could conceivably make certain types of programs in behavioral health, and if the people who completed those programs worked in areas of high need based on low income communities, that's a model we use now in our National Health Service Corps program. So we're familiar with the general approach to that we could perhaps have that forgiveness similar to public service loan forgiveness. These are some of the things we're talking about. We may not be able to incorporate all of them into the first year. They may play over into the second year. And then the other point I want to make clear to everybody is that we do see this as including undocumented students. We will be working with institutions in how to do that in a way that we make sure that we're benefiting undocumented students. At the same time, figuring out how we're able to actually evaluate the outcomes for undocumented students in the same way that we would evaluate them for anyone else, recognizing there are certain differences across these populations that we need to take into accord as we do the work going forward. So those are the other points I wanted to bring up. And I see someone, it can't be another dog. I see another hand has popped up from Kima Cargill. You want to
Thanks,
go?
Michael. Kim McCargill at University of Washington. No dog here, other than, the general husky.
Husky, yes, of
Yeah,
course.
that. Two questions, please. So one, I wanted to make sure I understood it. I couldn't tell if you meant that the programs, let's say it's determined by zip code, if that has to be uniform across the universities, or if there would be different ones. So for example, might it be that, say at UW, we designate, I don't know, library science, and then maybe Western designates nursing and Eastern designates occupational therapy.
Right.
Or do they need to be this? Okay, so they could be different. Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes, they could be. Yes, definitely. What I'm thinking we would do, which again, we're being very whatever, if people think this doesn't make sense, we can have some conversations about this, is that we might designate from within, because even within the listed sectors, I mean, there's a lot there, right? And so we may try to call out, we may issue a sort of a statement that says, what we're asking institutions to do is to nominate programs or apply for programs in these areas. And then you pick the institution. We'll certainly be broad enough to reach what we think is the full range of offerings that are out there that fall within whatever we're looking at. So that, yes, institutions can come in for completely different areas.
Okay, thanks. And then my second question has to do with self-sustaining or fee-based programs versus tuition-based. So at the University of Washington, we have a number of fee-based programs that are in high-need areas. So like one that comes to mind, there are some in speech and hearing sciences, for example. And students in these fee-based self-sustaining programs are not allowed to get state financial aid. So I'm assuming that would include this loan. So am I correct that any fee-based program would be excluded from designation?
We should probably talk more about that with you or any other institution that has that model. These would be graduate credential programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what I'm talking
Okay.
about. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. I
Uh,
would.
I see that Kay Lewis is here, and I think she may
Okay.
actually, so this may just be an internal question. I think Kay
Yeah.
might
Yeah,
have something to
well,
say.
I think it's okay, Kimma. I think that, so students who are in fee-based programs are eligible for state aid. It's the institutional aid is where we vary. So
Oh,
this
thank
should be okay. It shouldn't be.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry if we confused
That's
that.
okay. That's okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kay, for the
Yeah.
No
lesson.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we will have to comply with what the law, the law and what the spirit of the law is. And I mean, there may be things that we do in undergraduate aid that were meant to very closely model federal rules for very good reason for a very long time. That in this case, we may not, I mean, if there's a federal problem or whatever, we don't have to clone the federal problem as long as it meets the spirit, the language and spirit of the state law.
Mike, I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I don't even have a dog around.
Yeah.
So again, Kay Lewis from the University of Washington. Help me understand in terms of we've always been really hesitant with our undocumented students in suggesting the loan options because we're afraid about their ability to work at some point. I'm
Yes.
assuming you've all thought that through and there'll be some help there if that is the direction, if an undocumented student is awarded one of these loans, for instance.
Yeah, first of all, I think the issue of borrower benefits will be a sort of a richer conversation, and one of the components of borrower benefits has gotten much more attention on the federal level is income-based repayment limits, right? So among the array of borrower benefits, obviously there's deferment upon disability, death, that kind of stuff, right? Then the other one is income-based repayment, which means if you don't have income, you're not going to pay, right? You don't have to pay. So we want to structure a very generous income-based repayment program. That means that, and in fact, we may look at models based on Washington MFI, median family income, right? As ways of structuring something, because in other words, I mean, this is me sort of speaking from my own public policy perspective, but I think, in informal conversations with legislators and others over the years, I mean, I think most people would agree with this is we're not looking to force someone who gets a graduate degree and then some difficulties or whatever ends them up in something not much better than a minimum wage job to force them to make loan payments on a monthly basis. We're trying to figure out, like I said before, and this is very easy to say this at a high level. It's harder to flesh out the details, but I think this is a worthwhile journey of discovery to figure out how to do this, right? Is can we structure a loan product that essentially you repay if this pathway works out for you. And if the pathway doesn't work out for you, we will forgive it, and forgive it quickly, not using the 10-year model with the federal programs where it sits around on your credit record for many years, even though you're not going to have any chance to ever repay it. We'd rather have much shorter forgiveness cycles.
That's great. Thank you.
And by the way, I would say that model that I'm describing there, I know there's some people I've shared with who, in the national level, who are very sensitive to student debt issues, sort of very intrigued. They're like, if you can do this and you can learn how this works, you may be helping the whole country rethink, some approaches to how we deal with affordability and how we deal with financing higher education.
Great. And Mike, it looks like we have a question from Catherine.
Good morning, Catherine Mahoney with Virginia Mason Franciscan Health. I'm thinking about, and I'm excited to have the conversation that we're planning on having around how do we kind of figure out where we want to be pointing this investment. As I think about the experience of a student or a potential student looking for a graduate program, especially in the healthcare area, it's likely they're already working in healthcare, especially when I think about right, they're likely already employed. And so, as an employer, we're really invested in helping our folks grow. And I am very excited to share with you the couple of graduate programs that we would really prioritize. for an opportunity like this. But I'm having trouble understanding the function of higher ed institutions determining or applying for which programs would be eligible for this loan forgiveness program, and how we would, as an employer and as folks working directly with people who would be interested, would be able to navigate that. It feels, you know, unlike some of the other programs that we have the opportunity to run in Washington State, that feels like it ended up being kind of like a hodgepodge and tricky for both students and industry to navigate, to figure out where they'd be lucky enough to get opportunity for loan repayment. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you're thinking about that process working?
I guess I'm not fully understanding your question, but let me just, I'm getting something of the drift, but let me say some things, and we may have to have a conversation offline, is that the statute is based on the notion of determining eligible programs. So there's that's gonna be part of the element here. So we were looking at an approach of determining, you know, sort of having a set of approved programs, so you would know, and I would also say, by the way, as a program that's going to continue for at least, you know, hopefully 7 years, maybe beyond, right? Is we would hope that, you know, an institution comes in for program X, and that program would stay in the eligible and participating in a loan program for indefinitely, right? There's not going to be a term in which they leave. So yeah, there would be a known set of covered programs. But as opposed to the idea that I can shop among, somehow I can take this benefit and shop among any, you know, program, because that will, and there will be many high need programs that won't make it. I mean, that's just, you know, part of the way of, because if we allow that sort of, this high degree of portability will end up with the really difficult thing. Our theory is that we end up with a very difficult potentially program to A, manage, and B, to understand how it works to create student benefit and economic benefit. But we'd be happy to talk about that. We'd be also very happy to talk about any program. I mean, it's possible we could, you know, this might be too much in the first year, but structure a partnership with employers in which there is employer loan repayment supports on the back end if they accept employment, you know, in their field in the state, you know, et cetera. So very happy to continue the conversation, but not sure I'm getting what your alternative to our approach might look like.
I think you helped me. I hope that you helped clarify what I was hearing you say earlier.
Yeah.
My interest is in knowing that we have different needs in different communities, but there are some very clear, like in every community, there is a shortage of X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
That being like, great, you can, for example, get loan forgiveness if we decide to go with a nurse practitioner program, for example. You can only get that loan forgiveness if you're accepted to and able to go to the 2 out of the 10 programs that we have in Washington State, and just trying to figure out how that would work from an equity lens, from a way for us to be able to continue to help our workforce navigate and identify these opportunities for further education. That's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we can have more conversations, because I
Yeah,
think there's likely a way to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
question. Thank you.
Catherine, and Mike, I want to chime in real quick. I also can't find the raise hand button either. But Catherine, if you want, I run the Washington Health Corps programs here at WSAC. And if you'd like, I would like to connect with you and talk to you about our loan repayment program. And we are establishing a conditional scholarship for behavioral health right now.
Yep.
And so if you want to also connect, and maybe we can have some good conversations about that, see how we can support each other.
Yep. And Sarah, I had to make the screen super big to find the raise hand at the very end of the options, because it took longer than I'd like to admit to find it as well.
Right.
Thank you.
We have a question from a current council member, a council member and current graduate student himself. Paul, here you go for it.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thanks for this great overview for this program. So I have a few questions. So I'd say like these are like very basic questions. The first one that I have is like like, is this program going to be need-based? So like, is there going to be like an income eligibility for this program?
Yes, yes, that's in the statute. Yes.
Okay. So is it like 65% of MFI, 70% of MFI? Like, is it like explicitly mentioned in the statute? Like, what is it going to be?
I think, well, we'll have to get back to you on the specifics of that, but I think the statute calls out some reference to the way we do use it for Washington College Grant, but we'll double check. We'll get that.
I can go ahead and paste the specific
If you can find
statutory
it, we'll
text in the
forward it.
chat here.
Yeah, go
Great,
ahead.
thank you so much, Liv. And the next question that I have is like, is there a cap on like how much can be lent to each student, one single student, in 1 year? Like, is there a cap like that?
$20,000 per year
$20,000.
is the loan limit by statute. We do have the authority as an agency to lower, that's a cap. That's the statute says we
Okay.
can't go above 20. We could go lower. Usually loan programs also have a lifetime lending limit, which I believe we would have the authority to establish a lifetime lending limit. The other thing also for people to keep in mind, and I'm going a little bit away from your question, but this might be helpful for people to know because it's just your question stimulated that, is that we clearly want to be in a posture to stay with a student through the life of their program, right? So that's why whenever we do lending volume, we have to take into account that, whoever we lend to and who's in their first year, who's in a 2-year program, we want to maintain the financial capability to support them in the second year. So for example, just I'll make an extreme example, which therefore we can't do, is in the first year of the program, if we loaned all $10 million to first year students who are likely to continue to a second year, our second year's 10 million would already be spoken for. We would not be able to make any new loans. So we'll probably do a mixture in the first year of advanced students who are going to hopefully complete in their first year and first year students and whatever, how we mix that out and learn on that as we go.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, for this great explanation. And last question that I have is, so this money, can this be used for anything other than paying for the tuition? Let's say a student, they have a childcare need. So would they be able to use this money to pay for like childcare services, or maybe for the rent, or like getting groceries, like stuff like that? Or is it only limited to paying for the tuition?
I believe it would function somewhat. I would function the same as way we do with our undergrad student aid programs, which is it is not limited to what it is used for, though and this will be something we talk about. It may be applied to tuition first or whatever, but we'll have to. But no, it's not limited to only paying tuition.
Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mike.
And Pal, I'm also, for the benefit of everyone, going to add the eligible expenses definition from statute in the chat here as well.
Great. Thanks, Lou.
I think a common theme throughout the statute is there's many places where it does provide WSAC with the authority to determine many aspects of this program. And so that's what, a huge need for this conversation with you all today. So we really appreciate the engagement. So I just wanted to note that a statute does clearly define a few things, or upper limits or lower limits on things, but there is a lot that is left to us to best determine what's going to meet the need and have the highest impact.
And by the way, I think to me, at least and we've talked about this internally, is this obviously is going to be a small program when you look at it compared to all those who might be eligible, both programs and individuals. So the program, and we're used to running programs like that. All of our, the programs that Sarah mentioned before, our workforce programs, all are way undersized compared to the need out there. Therefore, what that means for us is we want to do more than just simply benefit those students who are lucky enough to get the loans, right? And the way we benefit more people is by understanding and learning from the operations of the loan program so we can make the public policy value clearer to the people of the state and the elected leaders of the state, right? And that's why this analytical component and evaluation component is so critical, and why we think it's important to structure the program in a way that supports our ability to be confident in the insights and findings we'll be able to share down the road with the legislature and the governor and others.
Mike, we do have a couple questions in the chat here. One from Candy Teeters. Does the 7-year program life, approximately 10 million per year, commence when awarding commences, i.e. fall 2025?
Yeah, yes.
That's my understanding as well.
So think of it as we take this as a direction that we have $80 million to support 7 years of loan originations. And so the first loan origination is occurring in 24-25. So that's year 1 through 7 years. And obviously, as we get to the end of the 7-year period, unless we think by then we'll know whether or not there's the capacity to continue. Repayments alone may enable the program to continue for a bit. But obviously, as you get to the end, if you ever get into a runoff, I mean, and this has been an issue with some loan portfolios around the country over the years, if you get into a runoff situation, you want to be in a position, like to think again, going back to that, you don't want to leave a person in a 2-year program in the lurch on the 2nd year. There's ways to manage to that scenario in the future. But that basically means is that, yes, we're going to start, we've got 7 years for the first 5 years. It's probably, a pretty solid financial model as 10 million a year as to how we'd operate and what we would do. And then once you get out to the 5th, 6th, 7th year, then based on what you know, what the environment is, you may adjust at that point. There was another question.
Yeah, they're from Hugo in the chat. Will one of the eligibility requirements specifically with undocumented students be that they have DACA, or can students apply for the graduate loan program with an ITIN?
We have not addressed that level of specificity. I think our inclination is to be as open as possible, but we'll have to have further conversation. In fact, one of our staff members who's not here today has worked extensively with undocumented student networks and focus largely on undergraduate issues, but we may want to convene I think more than we probably should convene, a conversation about that with a broader, specifically on this with a broader group of people.
And in transparency too, and Randy mentioned that we are in the process of interviewing for attorney services, and that's a specific area that we want to make sure that we have expertise to support us in making decisions, so we can again serve a maximum constituency there that we can. So,
Luke, if I could jump in too, this is Randy again. In building the program guidelines, we have also been very specific that we're going to rely a lot on what the schools already do to identify undocumented and using, kind of piggybacking off of some of that work and making the eligibility for the loans themselves.
and that's a good point, Randy. And I don't know if this is a good space to kind of dive a little further into that conversation, but yes, that there is a process with the lending process of making sure we're identifying our customers with federal regulations around that. So I think that's for further discussion, and especially as we get legal support on board. Well, there's a nice opening here, so if anyone's having trouble finding the raise hand button, feel free to come off mute if you have a burning question or something you'd like to share, because again, this is also an opportunity to share kind of your perspectives and experiences and hopes and anything that you think WSAC would find useful in making sure, again, that we are being equitable in how we're approaching this program. We are addressing the areas of high need that have been some of which have been identified in the statute, but also looking to experts around the room here as far as helping us to further define that. And then ultimately, as Mike emphasized, we want to make sure this is a high impact program. So we do need to be really targeted and strategic there. And so anything that people think would help us maximize these dollars we have to help students and help communities would be extremely welcome.
And Lou, can you put up the slide again at the end with the contact information?
Yes, I'll go ahead and
Because
do that now.
one of the things we can do is as we go forward, is we will convene additional remote meetings like this with perhaps a, specific agenda around specific pieces of what we're trying to solve for. And we will we will maintain a master, email address list so that everyone here I'm sure we must have everyone's email address because they had to register, right, Luke?
Mute button here. Yes, we
Yeah.
do. Anyone who's registered, and then
Okay.
we all.
So if you know of, so we will probably supplement that list with some other contacts we know, who we think would find this of interest. But if you know of anyone else who'd want to be on this sort of alert list for future conversations, please let me know. Please email to the emails you see here for Marla or Luke, and we may, taking advantage of all the flexible digital tools, there may be times when we may send a question out, a very specific question that we think we don't need a meeting for, and we may send a question out to everyone for input, thoughts, advice, and then once we look at the inputs, thoughts, advice, maybe we do convene a meeting on that, or maybe that answers, the question for us. I see a hand up from Candy Teeters. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I can't figure out my buttons here. It If the intention is implementation for fall 2025, is there a tentative timeline on when we're going to see next steps? So for example, what institution allocations may look like, specificity on what programs are going to be available, that it seems like the process should be accelerated pretty rapidly at this point with a fall targeted implementation. So just curious if there's a vision around that yet.
Randy, do you want to share our sense of this at this point?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of parts to that question. Operationally, what we plan to do is get the allocation information to the schools. What may not be up and running immediately, though, for that purpose is the ability to actually input the application. So there's a disconnect here. In the perfect world, we'd have this program ready to run by the end of this calendar year, by the end of December, because that fits with your packaging, that would fit with, everything else that goes on. We're not going to be there. Okay, that from where we're at, we're not going to be there. But very quickly, and I think on the one slide that you had up there, Luke, it had a date or a time frame of like end of the winter, beginning of the spring, or something like that for schools program selection and fund allocation. So late winter, early spring of next year, you would know by program which, what the dollar amounts are. We'll see where we are for the physical application process, the origination process. It might not be up and running, but you'll at least know the amounts. You'll know how much you can tell the different students that they'd be applying for. There are not a lot of criteria that we're going to enforce to approve the loan. It's a process, though, that we just need to be able to have up and running. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I think I missed this slide with the tentative timeline on it. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. That does mean, Mike, we've got our work cut out, though, to get that information out to the schools.
Yes. And we're going to get very expedited in identifying the eligible programs or the programs for which we're seeking applications. And we may, we may know that in the next 4 weeks, so that programs can come in and we'll probably, because again, there's a lot of learning curve here, because this is sort of a new endeavor to sort of assess a program. The way institutions are assessed for eligibility, like in Title IV, and the way we've done it, is a very different environment than what we're doing here, right? So we're going to figure out some approach that is user-friendly, but gives us the information we need, and we may be able to balance that best by having a very focused rollout in the first year. Yeah, there's a question about when would we identify the borrower benefits? Yeah, I mean, I think,
I'm just thinking from,
Yeah.
you know, even if we know how many students and our allocation and which programs, we'll have to be able to describe to them before they sign a promissory note, what the
Yes.
benefits are on the back end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the borrower benefit should be contractual, right? I mean, they should be in that note, right? I don't know if they're in the note or additional documents, but they need to be known at the time the obligation is taken on.
And so that will follow the timeline, because I know earlier on the slide, it looked like it was still, those were still being worked out.
Mike, I'll answer a little bit more. Yes, they're still being worked out. We have blocked into the program guidelines that they will be, general information about them, but not the specifics. If you do X, Y, Z, you get, this benefit. That's not built in there yet, but we have to let the originators and servicers at least know that that is coming and how it might work operationally.
There was another question above K's from Amber Hay. Is there a requirement for the student to commit to work in Washington State after completing the graduate program?
That, of course, is a very interesting question, which I think we would like to have benefits associated with that, but it's not clear in terms of the statute whether or not that's something we can do. So I would say we'll be sharing more on that later.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Kath.
Thanks. So on the, eligible graduate program determination piece again, what, in terms of the in-demand qualification, what data sets were you all planning on starting with to kind of help us narrow down what programs we might want to be looking at?
We would probably use, I mean, if you, I mean, it's not worth your time to look at the whole thing, but we regularly publish or annually publish our latest report is Helm, Higher Educational Labor Market. So we use Lightcast data and other data sets to analyze these things at that level. I mean, they can go to a very granular level. So that's the way we would look, to the extent that once we identify in our approach to identifying areas that we would be sort of inviting people to apply for, that's probably the kind of data that we would use to identify those. And we would look at both statewide indicators, but we also want to be respectful that there may be some meaningful patterns of geographic, diversity. I'm not exactly sure how we would handle that, because it's not so much where the institution is located, it's where the job is located. But we obviously that data set, the Lightcast data and other related data sets, and the data set that Lightcast absorb into it, like the BLS data, can be localized.
And Joel did put a link to that report in the chat for everyone's benefit. Looks like we had another question just come in from Carolyn. If grad students have a loan, would this count against them or disqualify them from teaching or research assistantships?
I assume that's a packaging issue at the campus level. But if people think otherwise, let us know.
Well, great. We are continuing to, I think, collectively monitor the chat here. Hopefully we caught every question that's been put in the chat so far. Please raise your hand if we missed one. And we have held, we initially had this set for an hour, but extended it 30 minutes. So we had sufficient time to field any questions or input you all had, but we're have plenty more time if folks have additional questions. And we also can move towards wrapping up whenever everyone's ready, but let's create a little bit more space if anyone has any additional questions. Mike, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. Oh, here we go. Candy, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry.
okay. You go first, and then I have one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a super in the weeds question, and maybe it's too early to answer, but do we know on the school side how the financial management fund request, those types of pieces are going to be administered? Is it going to be through Seesaw like we see with grants, or is it going to be more of one of these separate iterations like we've been experiencing with some of the conditional programs like National Guard grant and some of the teacher grants?
This is a very speculative answer. I don't think we'd be prepared to run it through the portal. Seesaw, if Seesaw, certainly not this year. So it would probably be, again, we're going to try and make it very user friendly, but it would simply be like a submission, by email to the agency. I mean, to the agency, which is whatever. So I would guess that, but I'm not the best one to have the background on that. I was going to say, because in that last question about the teaching assistantships and things like this is, to people like Kay and her colleagues at the campuses, and who've lived for years with financial aid packages for graduate students. We very much need any thoughts, advice you have on any, lurking issues that we may not even be aware of, in this realm compared to undergraduate aid award. I know that at the start of COVID, I know there is some RCWs out there that can affect, even teaching assistantships, because I remember at the start of COVID, we had to get an executive order to waive some statutory provisions to allow some teaching assistants to teach in the remote environment, even though no one was coming back, and we didn't want to have people coming back to the state of Washington from where they lived for that purpose. So if there's anything out there lurking that, please be sure to flag it for us.
Let's see, it looks like Pal, you had a follow-up question here. It was in response to posting kind of the prioritization of funding for eligible students. I'll just go ahead and read it for you here. It seems like the eligibility criteria is extremely broad in statute. Will WSAC work on specifying the eligibility criteria like an MFI cutoff or something similar? I certainly think WSAC will be spending time on narrowing this down, but the extent to which I don't know if Mike or Randy or Marla wants to speak to this any more specifically.
Yeah, obviously we have to give the campuses a set of eligibility standards that they can use and make awards off the base of to meet the shared compliance, and because then we all can be audited on these things down the line and all this kind of stuff. So this is, I think, Marla can confirm or not, but I think the statute basically puts a general approach. We have to give a more specific approach.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I think one of the things I anticipate, I mean, some of this, it's all under discussion, which is what this conversation is about, but clearly it is a need-based program, and we anticipate, just as we do in the other financial aid administered by WSAC, that either the WASFA or the FAFSA would be the document, and it defines need in statute as pretty broadly. So I'm not sure it would be limited to 65% MFI or lower. It could be higher, but again, think about $10 million across the state, and that's not a lot of awards to be made. So maybe we would institute something like that. I don't know. That's where you all come into play, is how do you see this being structured that is easy for you to manage?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marla.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well,
looks like we've hit that magic moment.
Okay.
For the motion to adjourn.
I'll just jump in with a appreciation and thanks to everyone. for your time today. It appears we've had some really good broad representation of institutions across the state, folks representing students themselves. We, of course, appreciate our friends at the State Investment Board and the State Treasurer's Office who have been named in statute to help us in helping shape and build out this program. And then I did see some of our legislative members here. Very much thank you for your leadership on state higher education issues and your interest in this, and industry and sector partners and just people who generally care about advancing higher education in our state and opportunities for students and driving our economy. So hopefully I didn't miss naming any area that someone's representing, but it does take a village, as they say, to make these things happen. So that's what we're looking for here, and just invite you to continue the conversation with us. And Mike, I don't know if you want to share any final words before we sign off here. Okay, well, and just to respond to a couple technical questions, there was a question if we'd be posting the recording and the PowerPoint slides. And we will go ahead and do that and make sure that everyone in attendance here and also we're accumulating a distribution list based on people who have expressed interest or attended, and we'll continue to do so. And feel free to pass this around to your colleagues as well. So with that, we hope everyone has a wonderful Halloween. Stay safe out there, and we will be in touch.